Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our 5th webinar in the Digital A series. Today we're talking about low-skilled learners. Johnny Cunningham, if I can pronounce her name properly, is principal at Redbridge, and she is a vice chair of our HOLEX board. She's going to be hosting today, and Sarah Howarth from WEA, who led our strand, will be presenting, and she'll be joined later by Yasmin from WEA, who's going to talk a bit more detail about some bits. I will just nip through some quick housekeeping areas if Sarah could pop the slide forward for me. So I'm hoping you can all hear and see us properly. If you can hear the audio but not see the presentation, there may be a daisy icon on your taskbar. If you click that, we may magically appear. There's an area where there should be some questions, and we'd love you to put questions live today. So if anyone wants to try that out. The person who said, "Can you hear my children running in the background?" No, we can't. You're absolutely fine. So if you want to pop questions through the question panel, that'd be brilliant. If you can't hear us, if you can see the screen, you might be able to see that if you select the audio option and then choose phone call, you can dial in and listen to us. So you should be able to watch via the screen and listen via your telephone. You will be charged, but if you've got inclusive minutes on your phone, that should be included within your minutes. So any questions, please throw them across. That'd be brilliant. And I will hand over to Johnny to tell you about the project.
Right, welcome everyone. I understand there's more than 300 of you out there. Technology has been a significant barrier for us, and the Digital Ace project really has been designed to support providers on the next stage of their journey. It's a developing area of expertise, and we want to ensure that what we provide is still of high quality, as we would have expected for classroom-based learning. So the project is here to support other practitioners and providers in the sector. Thank you, Charlie. Next slide. The webinar this afternoon is to give you an overview of the guidance materials that have been developed, particularly for this strand, which is supporting low-skilled learners. And it's to help you to consider what approaches people have been using, how successful they've been, and to actually share those examples. And it's really there. It will encourage us all to learn more and develop our knowledge and skills in this area. And of course, you'll have the resource pack after, and this is an introduction really to that guidance. So we'll move on then, and I will very quickly introduce again Sarah Howarth and also welcome Yasmin, both from the WEA, who are joining us and presenting on this particular webinar. We're looking forward to hearing from you. You'll see me again at the end after their presentation when we've got time for your questions. So as Charlie has said, please pop your questions in there and we'll answer as many of them as we can. So thank you. I'll pass over to Sarah now.
Thank you, Johnny. Thank you. I'm really pleased to be here with you this afternoon. It's been a really interesting project. So what we're going to do today is talk about the kind of things that people have done to help their low-skilled learners engage online. It's been very difficult for many of our learners during the pandemic. Of course, we want to support our most vulnerable and disengaged learners, but sometimes we have to offer them remote learning. So we have started to find some solutions to how we might do that. And what's been great gathering this guidance together is people are sharing what they're doing. We're starting to learn. We're starting to get some good ideas about the things that we can do to help learners. So we've developed some guidance, and the purpose of the webinar is to introduce you to some of the information, as Johnny said. And what we're going to do is look at some of the key points that have come out of the guidance. So within the guidance that you will receive, we've got various issues that we've clustered. We're looking at things about motivation, confidence and skills. We're looking at how people have done initial assessment, at engaging learners, new learners, existing learners, a bit about the teaching, learning and support approaches, and as has been mentioned, there are some examples. So all the way through the guidance, there are examples and there are some checklists that we hope will be useful to you. So it looks a bit like this when you get the guidance materials. So the materials have been produced for providers to use within their own services and share with staff as appropriate. And there are some tips and examples within the guidance. It doesn't come with the red lines on it. What we've got is tips and advice gathered from the adult community learning providers, the relevant resources, the approaches people have used. It's in Word, so you can use it flexibly however you want within your service. And there's some case studies as well, which show in more detail how people have approached these issues. And I will mention a couple of case studies as I go through today. So this guide will be sent to you after the session, and it'll also be on the HOLEX website with the other Digital ACE materials. What we've done to develop the strand is we had a working group, people from various adult learning services came together, people from other kinds of organisations like Good Things Foundation shared information and advice. And we put together lots of little bits of our jigsaws of what we were doing to collate our current practice, share our ideas and put it together into one document. So before we start, we'd just like to do a little poll to find out where people are at. So think about what stage are you at in delivering online learning to low-skilled learners and pick one of these answers.
Okay, everyone, so what stage are you at in delivering online learning to low-skilled learners? The poll's open, so if you'd like to vote now, that'd be brilliant. So number 1, you've not delivered at all. Number 2, you're just starting or delivered a very small amount. 3, successfully delivered some courses. 4, delivered a wide range of relevant courses. If everybody could vote, that would be fantastic. And we have got 83% of you voted, so I'm going to close the poll now and share the results with you. So only 5% of you have not delivered at all to this group of learners. 16% of you have delivered a wide range of relevant courses, and the rest of you are somewhere in the middle. So 42% of you are just starting or delivered a small amount, and 37% have successfully delivered some courses. So yeah, most of you are sitting sort of somewhere in the middle. I'll hand you back to Sarah.
Oh, thank you. Well, that's fantastic to know. Oh, what have I done? I've lost my slides now. Right. Okay. So you've got a slide that says scope and limitations now, hopefully. So the scope of what we're talking about in terms of low-skilled learners, we're talking about learners who are operating at an entry or pre-entry level, but also people generally who've got low confidence or people who've got low digital skills. And it doesn't necessarily equate that people who are entry or pre-entry level are the people with the low level of digital skills. You can find all kinds of combinations of different skill levels. So we've covered, as I said, some of the issues and practical solutions. And one of the things, just to say, it still is a developing area of expertise. No one has all the answers, but some of us are getting some things that work. So to get started, in terms of engaging and getting started with low-skilled learners, obviously online learning can create barriers to people, additional barriers. People think it's not for them, people lack experience in using online platforms, they're worried about safety, they're worried about how they might get on, they're worried about doing things wrong. There are all kinds of extra problems that they're facing people in engaging with the online courses. Well, so how have we looked at it? In terms of motivation and confidence, people really need a lot of support to get going. And it is sometimes just the confidence. There was research that showed that people thought this just isn't for me. And that equated a lot to the low level of literacy and other skills. So we want to make sure that people know it is for them. What we would advise, I think, looking at the information, is keep in touch with learners, always encourage them to have a go, and invest the time to build people's confidence in online learning. If you look at things like focusing on everyday use of IT as an entry point, what can people already do? What do they know how to do? Or maybe offer relaxing activities to get people involved with using technology. So some people have done very informal, relaxing activities as a first point, just to get people on. Would say provide support in as many different formats as possible. So support in how to engage with the technology. So think about, are there simple documents you can share with people? Do you have a phone line or a help desk? Can you make some simple videos and send people links? Is there an option of having one-to-one support? Some people have put in drop-ins for students so that they can get together and just discuss how it's going. Once you've got started and you get a little bit stuck, what else can you do? And really, we need to look at making the language really, really simple and using lots of visuals and symbols. There's a lot of jargon, we know. It's a whole new area of jargon for us. One of the ways that's worked very well is expanding the range of people who can offer support to our learners. So learners can help support their friends, and that works well. Sometimes once some of them have got the confidence, they can explain it to other people. This is how you get onto this Zoom. This is how you get onto this webinar. Sometimes people have engaged family members in initial sessions to help people get started. And in some services, they have trained up tech buddies to support the students on their first sessions, and they can be either staff or volunteers. There's also schemes where you can train volunteers with things like Lloyd's Digital Champions and Digital Unite, which support the training of volunteers who can help within the classroom and in different ways. And a good example of this was MenCap, where they were training digital champions, so peer champions plus other people. So I'd love to hear how that's gone as well. So engage everybody you can to get people started. Ground rules are slightly different, I think, for online learning, and they're different from classrooms because you need to think about how do you take turns, what about muting, how do you raise your hand, all things about getting safe and safeguarding that we've covered in another webinar. So it's important that people know what to expect and how they should behave in online learning. And some learners and apparently some tutors needed some guidance about study skills as well. And that was things like finding a suitable quiet space where you can learn, looking at what's in the background of your video if you're showing yourself on screen, what kind of clothes you're wearing. Someone was telling me about people in their pajamas on the bed. I don't know, teaching maybe not. However, it just reassures people if they know what to expect. As I mentioned, informal learning's a good starting point. Maybe have a chat session for people. Once they've been given a link to something like a Zoom or a Teams site, just let them join in at any point during an hour so that they don't feel the pressure if they can't quite get the technology working. A good example came from Buckinghamshire Adult Learning, where they called it a three-pronged approach that the tutor had used. Started off with reassuring the learners and setting the expectations, and then building on the learners' existing knowledge, using whatever they could do. Can they use WhatsApp? Can they use Facebook? Whatever can they do to start with? Build on that and provide lots of extra support. And in that way, we can end up with successful learning. So, initial assessment and initial engagement as well. Obviously, we need to do assessment online if we're working entirely remotely. It seems to work best if you use a mixture of online form filling and initial assessment plus some personal contact. So follow up anything that's online with a phone call or a video call. Keep it personal, keep it friendly. It's much better than just looking at a form that's not so friendly, not so accessible to people. And put an example of Manchester ESOL initial assessment process within the guidance. So there's a case study there outlining how they've done it, because they've developed a very successful approach. So what we found is learners may be very reluctant to say they're struggling, that they're on the wrong level. People are not always willing to open up online or over the computer. So it's really, really important to establish those starting points for your students. Make sure people are on the right courses. And we need to allow people to engage at different points. As their confidence in online learning builds, it's a progressive learning journey, and by that I mean sometimes people might just like to switch on and watch, then they might progress to maybe putting a little bit in the chat, and it might be quite a while before they're willing to actually speak out across the camera and speak to other people. One of the good tips we got about this stage of initial engagement as well is to make it clear to learners that you're checking their subject knowledge. If there's a problem with the IT, it doesn't matter at all. We're there to help them to overcome those problems with IT. Always ask for help with your IT issues. We only want to know where you are with your ESOL, your English, your maths, whatever it is we're teaching. So use a combination of questions through email or on an online platform, plus more personal contact. Some people have used things like Google Forms to collect information, or even assessments like BKSB. But many services are successfully offering a choice to their learners. Oh, I forgot to say, yes, think about the equipment people have got. If people are using a phone, then they're not going to be able to read things that are tiny. So we need to keep things very big and accessible for them. So in terms of delivering the learning, it's a good idea to think about how can we vary the time and the pace to suit the learners. So can we make it flexible for learners? So different ways that people have done things are, for example, having recorded sessions, which will be available over YouTube, accessible anytime, and maybe better for some of the learners to access. And that is supplemented by some sessions where they can come and have a less formal activity, more of a chat, more of a practice your speaking and listening kind of approach. So if it's difficult for people, you could vary the timing, you could make it accessible at different places, different times and places. You can do it as pre-class work, maybe. You've recorded something, people have used YouTube for ESOL and functional skills, and some people have put materials up on their website so that the learners can get to them at any point to prepare for the classes. In addition to that, some people have posted learning packs with follow-up calls from learning assistants, learning support assistants. And there are other materials that people can access anyway freely, things like the ESOL Nexus resources that have been well used to support learning for different groups of people. One provider used the ESOL Nexus resources and then had Google Meets, where they had a coffee morning each week just to consolidate the learning and practice things. It works well if we deliver a mixture of well-being kind of activity and some fun things alongside the formal kind of teaching, and that helps to build interaction from the learners. So we're trying to engage people in whatever way we can, and in the early stages, it's better if it's fun. Oops, sorry, current slide. Have we made it fun? I've lost my presentation now. Oops. So, apologies. In terms of using social media, people have used that in all kinds of creative ways. People have used a whole range of social media tools: Facebook posts, Twitter, Facebook Live, Instagram, Google, email, YouTube, and lots of other different activities. And these have been used for a wide range of things, including marketing and promotion of courses, advertising, but also to engage with people when we start. So maybe have an open day, get some people involved in a Facebook chat, looking at useful tips around something, homeschooling, whatever else was appropriate at the time, health and well-being tips. You can have social media challenges, and you can also put up displays of learner work and videos onto Facebook, and then other people can see the kind of things I'd be able to learn if I join that class. So digital skills, obviously important. Everybody's going to need some kinds of digital skills to be able to engage in online learning. As I mentioned before, having low levels of digital skills doesn't necessarily correspond to having low skills in other levels, but there are already lots of examples of us developing generic digital skills. So there are lots of IT related qualifications, non-accredited learning that people have already done. What you need to be able to do is supplement this with bespoke support on using the specific platform that you're delivering your learning in. So a bit more on GoToWebinar, Zoom, whatever else you're using. People have also used the digital entitlement qualifications. So in some services, everybody is routinely going to be heading towards digital entitlement as an underpinning skill, just to give that confidence. It's a good idea if you're working with lower level ESOL learners to supplement the teaching alongside with some ESOL input as well. There's a lot of jargon, as we know. There's a lot of language to learn in using IT. And tutors, of course, need to know what they're doing and be upskilled as well. What we found was there's quite a lot of training regarding how to use online platforms. You can get a lot of help over the internet, but there's less training to support the tutors with the actual delivery of learning and the specific skills that are needed to support your learners. So you need to create that time and space for your tutors. Give opportunity for tutors to share good tips and ideas, to share materials and best practice. And successful approaches have been things like team teaching, online peer observation to help people work together and support one another. What's been quite helpful in a lot of cases is making sure that tutors have support from other staff and volunteers at the start of courses. So if the learners are having some difficulties getting on the system, there are other people there that can help them get started. And things like digital training for tutors, peer learning and buddying, and being able to trial things out without the pressure of it working perfectly the first time have all been really helpful for the tutors to feel supported and confident in delivering their online learning. In terms of planning the teaching, it helps to strip it right down to think about how much more difficult it might be for the tutors and for the learners to engage online. So if you think about just having a couple of learning objectives per session, not trying to squash too much in, because it's still something that people are settling into. You also need to remember, put in your time for your breaks. Allow a little bit of social time within the class. Tutors often need a bit longer to plan and deliver online learning, especially as it's new. It's a whole extra dimension to the teaching. In terms of helping the learners, it helps to consider differentiating how we're assessing them as well. Learners often get to a point where they just can't quite cope with something new that you're adding to the lesson, some extra little skill that they've got to learn. So what we found works well if you remove pressure on people just by having a bit of flexibility. So if you need to, can you follow up with a one-to-one call outside of your class time? Can you use your learner support assistants or volunteers to support individuals in breakout rooms or in some other kind of way? Is there any extra contact that can help the tutors by finding out what it is the learners need, what support they need, and how best to work with them? As I mentioned before, YouTube's great. You can put your lessons, very small snippets of them or longer lessons. You can put bits of material, people can create things themselves. It allows the learners to watch things at their own time and pace and to just to stop and think about things if they need to. So you can pre-record the learning activities to prepare for sessions, or if everyone's in agreement, you can record your class and post it on YouTube, but you've got to make sure you've covered all the safeguarding and privacy issues if you're going to do that. Breakout rooms and one-to-ones are very helpful to give support for the learners. Learners like to be able to communicate with their tutors, so if there's capacity within the platform you're using, show them how to chat. Otherwise, can you use WhatsApp alongside the lesson that you're doing? Can they text you? They need to be able to say something outside of the group, like they would in a real classroom, face-to-face, something private if they need to, if they need to ask for clarification. And learner support assistants, if you have access to them, can be used very flexibly within group, pair work and outside of classrooms. And people have been very successful with creatively training their learning support assistants and their volunteers to support their learners. In terms of giving feedback and marking work, there are other ways of doing that as well. You can don't need to write things. You can give voice clips. People can, learners can send you photos of their work. The tutors can send back WhatsApp messages to them. There are different kinds of resources that you can use. Tools such as Cami, which will help you with different ways of recording your feedback to learners. And at the end of the guidance, we've put a link to various tools that people have found helpful that I hope some of you will be able to use as well. Other services have put the resources straight onto their website and put a link to them. So a mixture of freely available resources. We've listed some of these at the end of the guidance as well for you. And some of them are created locally and resources have started to be shared. Excuse me. So the good news is we have got lots of people who have successfully delivered online learning to low-level learners. Excuse me. We've got examples of ESOL, literacy, maths, basic skills, creative arts, low-level groups, people with extra barriers such as homelessness and substance abuse, successfully engaging. And there are lots of great things that we can share from each other. So to give you a little flavour of that now, I'd like to pass over to my colleague Yasmin, who's going to tell you a little bit about how she has worked with ESOL learners.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. It's really lovely to be here and to talk to you about what we're doing in our classrooms. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So we're going to be talking specifically about ESOL students, EME, English, Maths and ESOL students. I've kind of divided it up. We're working with from pre-entry or new to ESOL right up to level 1, level 2 and beyond. Now, the first thing I put on that slide is that we do notice that a lot of our students, not just ESOL, but a lot of our students use mobile phones to access our virtual learning environment, which is Canvas, and our video conferencing tool, which is Zoom. And we sometimes find that's a little bit problematic. So we've quite often had to log on ourselves to see what our students are seeing via their mobile phones, because it's different to a laptop or an iPad. So just to make you aware of that technology, and the accessibility is it's not as good, or the functionality is not as good on a phone as it is on a laptop. However, I am impressed with our ESOL students, and they seem to maneuver their ways around those things. So the first thing we noticed, so we started doing Zoom and our virtual learning environment back in April with pre-entry and ESOL students, and we noticed that the Zoom only, so the video conferencing only courses worked a lot better. Because it was just one form of technology that they were able to use, and so that was quite a nice way to start after lockdown to get them in. And then what we did, we introduced Canvas, the VLE, much later on, because it was just too much for them to take on board, really. And we wanted to enable our students to be sort of confident and comfortable with the video conferencing part of learning, and then give them short bursts of Canvas. So perhaps show them the VLE, the virtual learning environment, and say, right, this is where you'll be, and then give them little snippets of it. And then just to make a point that there's a real possibility that not all students will be able to use all the tools that we offer. And just to be aware of that, we have lost, I think, at all the levels for ESOL, at least 1, maybe 2 students in some courses due to other issues such as sort of health issues perhaps, or just not being able to get to grips with the technology. Now, when we go back into face-to-face teaching, we'll be able to re-engage those students and re-engage them with Canvas, and I think they need that one-to-one support. Going on, talking about support, I have to reiterate that you can't underestimate the level of support that students, particular ESOL, and other courses, actually, we have Pilates courses, we have things like art courses, sort of history and literature courses. So this goes across the board, that there's a need for some students, 1 or 2 out of perhaps a cohort of 15, who actually need a lot of one-to-one support. We offer that support through, initially through the Canvas, the virtual learning environment, through the emails. If they can't get onto that, our student services will support them. We will support them as tutors and staff. And we also have, as Sarah's mentioned, videos that we use, very short 60-second videos about how you, I don't know, download the app, either Zoom or Canvas. We've also got bilingual documents, if people are better at reading in their own language or whatever, rather than a video. We also call on all the things that Sarah has said with ESOL students. So if we find that students who have support at home from children or any family member or friend are more able to access and use any of the digital apps. So that's the pre-entries. That's still our hardest to reach group. We've just finished a 6-week course with pre-entry students called Conversation Club. Getting onto Zoom wasn't too much of a problem, but we still have 2 or 3 students that haven't been able to access their Canvas accounts. We put bilingual support assistants in there to help some of those students. We use breakout rooms, and we're still finding that we're still now trying to get them on. So don't underestimate the support that's needed. Once it's there though, and once students are up and running, it's priceless. It's really, really good. Now, going up to the slightly higher levels, so the entry 1 and entry 2, we were able to, so we find that a lot of our ESOL students already use some sort of video app, whether it's Viber, IMO, WhatsApp, whatever it might be. They need to communicate with family and friends, so they use those apps to do that. So that actually facilitated our move to Zoom and Canvas. Zoom in the first instance, because we were able then to send links through using WhatsApp or that sort of thing rather than an email. And then we were also able to send through short help videos and documents in WhatsApp to get them sort of initially interacting with us. And also you're able to send screenshots. So what we did was we maybe sent a screenshot of a browser. Then the next screenshot was how do you access that particular virtual learning environment. Then what do you do next? And it was just step by step to allow those students to be able to access in a way that was easier for them. And another big part was to not overwhelm the students. So once you get them onto Zoom, introduce them to things slowly. Some students will absolutely surprise you. I had students in entry 1 who were sharing screen and sharing pictures and doing things like that, and then trying then to get them to share their actual virtual learning environment, their Canvas, was a little bit more tricky, but as the weeks went on, we were able to do that. The other thing that I found when you're teaching, and again, this probably goes across the board, you have to slow down everything when you're using a video conferencing tool and a virtual learning environment tool, because, which you normally would do in a classroom, but you kind of have to slow everything down a little bit more until students get familiar with things and then are able to go on. So for example, we did one course from April to July, and we've just finished a 6-week course this week. And I had students sharing their Canvas, so their virtual learning environment, and downloading a link, and able to then go off into a breakout room and use that to facilitate their role play conversation that they were having to do. Can we move to the next slide? Thank you. So these are just some of the barriers for some of our ESOL students. The one that goes across the board for anybody, whether ESOL or not, is the digital skills gap. So that exists, as I said, across the board in all of our courses. And we try really, really hard to offer one-to-one support to try and get those students on, because we can see the benefit of them accessing these courses digitally. And at some point, you know, when we go back to face-to-face, they will still be able to do that. Some students learn very quickly, other students need very much kind of supported and scaffolded sort of interactions. Don't underestimate the resource. The bilingual support we have found is extremely useful, from enrolment right up to when we're trying to get class documents completed. We use staff, if we've got bilingual support, we use volunteers, we use LSAs, anything that we can use, where we can use them and ask people, we do you know, call upon those people to help out where they can. There are other things that you have to be aware of. I have actually been prone to this, where the Wi-Fi drops and you're thrown out. So I've been thrown out of a class and my students have been sat there talking to each other, which I don't have a problem with, but it's quite frustrating for a tutor to be thrown out. And just to be aware of that, and losing students, you know, halfway through a lesson, and just to follow up, I suppose, to make sure that it was just a Wi-Fi issue. We've had issues around limited data where people can't download apps, and sometimes a lack of support at home. Students may be willing to engage, but are not able to because of these kind of factors. And as I said, some students suffered with some health issues for looking at a screen for too long, and that's just one of those things. There are other, so in that respect, some students may not be able to engage digitally, and we will just be waiting for a course back online. This is just an example of one of the courses that we're running at Entry 1, and it just shows you the student view on their homepage, and most of their work is in modules. Could I have the next slide, please, Sarah? Thank you. I wanted to finish on this because I really, really think that the students who we've been able to engage, and there's quite a lot, I would say we have engaged the majority of our ESOL students across the last few months since April to now. And that engagement has been really, really positive. It's been frustrating, I think, at times, but it's been immense in terms of well-being, particularly in the early days when people really wanted to see each other. The student peer support, again, has been really great. They are able to engage with each other outside of the classroom or within the classroom to sort of explain a little bit in their own languages to each other, and then to get on. Going back to Sarah's point, some students, even though perhaps their sort of language skills are not that advanced, they're able to interact very quickly digitally because they're used to using these apps and things, to the point where some of the students have asked for additional work in in Canvas in terms of homework, and so that's it kind of pushes us as teachers to because they're obviously interacting, to put that work on you know, for them. Once we return to face-to-face teaching, I envisage it would be much easier for us because we will actually be able to see their phones, to see where their issues are, to get them to do much more sophisticated things using the video conferencing and our virtual learning environment. And this is just this page here I wanted to show you, just basically shows you this, that we use Zoom as a video conferencing tool, and it's all within their actual account. So a student has to set up their own account with a password. Their live meeting information is embedded in that course that they've enrolled on, only they can see it. And also there's an inbox here that they can interact with us if they want to. So it's really pushed some of our students to do things far quicker than we would have originally expected them to do. And I have to say, I'm really overwhelmed by the great start that we've made, and really, really pleased with everything that's happened. And I'm really looking forward to when we do go back to face-to-face and how we can continue to use this sort of the tools that we're using. So thank you for listening. I'll pass it back to you, Sarah.
Sorry, unmute myself. Thank you very much. Yes, that was really great. Let's just think back to the question to ask the audience now again. So a quick poll again, based on what you've heard so far, can you use any of the ideas you've heard in your own delivery? So Charlie's opening the poll, I think.
So yeah, the poll's live, everybody. If you'd like to vote, that would be brilliant. So can you use any of the ideas you've heard so far in your own delivery? Yes, definitely, I'm ready. Maybe. I'd like some more help. Not at the moment, or not applicable. You're all superstars and you're delivering all of it already yourselves. So if you could just pop your votes in now, that would be brilliant. Any more for any more? I've got 72% of you voted. If you're not concentrating, come back to your screen and click one of the poll options. Okay, lovely. I've got 77% of you. I'm going to close the poll now and I will share the results. Okie doke, so half of you have said yes, definitely, I'm ready. 30% of you said maybe, 3% have said you'd like some more help, 2% not at the moment, and 12% of you are already delivering all of this. So half of you said yes, you're ready and you can use some of these ideas in your own delivery, which is brilliant. So thank you, Sarah and Yaz.
Thank you. Well, I'm so glad people are using things already, and if you haven't done already, give it a go. So I've got one more bit of information to share with you. Have you got the top tips up there on the audience view now?
No, we can't currently see your screen or presentation, Sarah.
You can't see my screen. Oh no, what am I on then? What am I doing, Charlie? I'm so sorry. It's show screen.
Yeah, perfect. We can see it.
You see it now?
Yeah,
Apologies.
we can see the top tips. Brilliant.
Luckily, I'm not teaching using this. Right, so in the guidance, we've finished with 10 top tips. So just to focus a little bit about what we've developed as our ideas are developing. So I'd like to share those with you now. So first of all, adapt your delivery approaches to suit your learners. So be flexible, I think, in the way you're delivering online, and think about what kind of ways you can use technology. There are lots of different examples of how people have done it. 2, make people feel comfortable and safe with online learning. And that is done by providing one-to-one opportunities for people to talk to you, reassuring your learners, being friendly and supportive, lots of different ways of reassuring and supporting people, and looking at how to continue to make them feel comfortable. Offer pre-course sessions to go through the essential skills of online learning. Lots of providers have added additional sessions or induction. If it's possible, you could bring people into centres where you could give them some digital instruction. If not, the kind of things we've been talking about, lots and lots of support before you actually start on the teaching part, so that it doesn't interfere with the teaching part of the subject. Adapt your teaching for online. So different things, visuals, amount of text, content, and have very clear messages for your learners so they know what to expect. Create videos. It's another good tip, I think, that can be for use in class for additional work. You can show practical elements. We've got some good examples of like art and craft courses where tutors have made videos of the actual practical parts to share with the learners, so you can access those freely outside of the classroom as well. I've touched on before, develop ground rules and basic study skills, and this is a way of reassuring the learners of what's expected of them. It might be a whole new world they're entering into. Develop the skills of your staff and your volunteers, and you can use them flexibly to support your learners and to support other staff as well. So you could create new volunteer or paid roles. You could have digital champions or tech buddies. You could train your learner support assistants to support online. Lots of skills you can develop amongst your wider team. Remove the pressure on learners. So adapt your approaches for different learners. And just think about how you could differentiate the success. To come out of there, right. how you could differentiate. Do you need to give extra one-to-one support for people? And it's important to keep that community. People love learning. They love coming to centres. They love being in courses because they feel part of a community. So what can we do to add? What can we have that's less formal? How can we build in discussions, chats, social interactions? Can we use social media to help people build a sense of community? Sometimes learners might like to have their own WhatsApp group so they can keep in touch. What fun and interesting short activities can we do? And lastly, everyone can do something, so just don't underestimate your learners' potential. Everyone can engage in some way. It might just start with texting or WhatsApping, but you can work on the positive, find out what they can do and work from there. So those are our tips, and I hope you find those useful. As I mentioned, and in the guidance, which so I'm not going to spend a lot of time looking at it now, but there are various links. So it'll look something like this, various categories of links that I'm hoping will be useful for you. There's examples of some training that's available for staff, links to the digital volunteers that I mentioned, some examples of free resources that you could use, and some of the tools that people have used, different tools. You might not want to use them all, but there might be something there that you've not tried before. So it's well worth having a look at the links and seeing how it might help what you're doing. So finally, just wanted to say it is worth doing. It takes a lot of time sometimes and a lot of support for the low-skilled learners to engage. But we're adult learning providers. We want people to be involved. We want people to be included. And it's from the learner's point of view, it's very successful, it's very empowering. You're opening up a whole new world through online learning. So I think just persevere would be the final message. So thank you. And if I just move back to Johnny now.
Hi, thank you both very much indeed for those presentations, and what a positive note to end on. We must thank all of the providers that worked with you on this project. It's quite a fair number, some of whose examples you referenced in your presentation. So thanks to both of you, as well as to the working group that's helped you develop the guidance material. And what you've done really is you've given us lots of ideas of things that have been working across the services. We've acknowledged the challenges, but it's great to hear how you've overcome those. And I hope it's given everybody the appetite to go and look at those resources, because we are all still learning on this journey. We've got some questions which we can turn to now. We've got one from Jenny Wilkinson from Sheffield. And her question really is about those people that don't have access to email or Zoom. And what can you share with us about learners learning remotely if they've only got a phone, or they're just using WhatsApp, or maybe they can text? Anything you can add that would be helpful, please. Thank you.
Yes, well, I think if they've got a phone, that's a really great start, and would say build on what people can do already. So if you have access to text or WhatsApp, then we can send links. We could send links to videos of things. We could send instructions for how people might move to the next stage by engaging on Zoom. If they've got a smartphone and they can download apps, then they've got the capability of moving slowly and at their own pace onto other forms of engagement. So I would use whatever we've got and start with the keep it fun, focus on the well-being, focus on the engagement, see how can we actually work with the students. Can we do some meetings via WhatsApp if everybody's comfortable with that? Can we move them onto Facebook or other tools? There are lots of things that people might have done that gets people started. And once you're a bit confident with one tool, more willing to try another new tool. So then you move on to the Zoom, and then, as Yaz said, you can move on to Canvas, which is much more difficult. Well, in my view, but people can do it.
Okay, that's encouraging, Sarah. I've got two questions now that sort of build on that. One is from Rosaline, who's asking about the struggle people have had with equipment. So if people don't have the appropriate equipment, have you been able to overcome that? And the other related question with that is from Kate, has raised a question about GDPR. So if you're using WhatsApp, you know, how have you overcome the personal details that others can see? And if you've got any guidance on that, that'd be very helpful. So it's about the equipment, lack of equipment, and the whole security issue if you're using platforms that are not as secure.
Yeah, do you want to say something else?
I can talk about equipment. I know we've enabled quite a few students to actually use the equipment they've got. So in the first instance, that's the first, and they don't quite know how to use the equipment they've got. When I was in the classroom, there was a student who had 300 messages on her voicemail. She just didn't know how to access it. So I think that's the easiest bit, which is to allow them to access the devices that they might have. Certain projects, and Sarah probably knows a bit more about this, where we've actually given out equipment to people. I don't know if Sarah wants to say the GDPR issue. The way we've looked at it, particularly in WhatsApp, is you know, if you want to join a group, you have to give permission to give your phone number and name to the person who's setting up the group. Sometimes it's our students who set up those groups, in which case the onus is taken off of you as an organisation or provider, and the students take that on board, and then they run with that. Tutors don't have to be on there. I have a work phone, so I'm quite often on there, but you don't have to be, and people can leave. So if you set up a group and somebody no longer is with you anymore as a student, they simply leave. I don't know if I've answered the question, but that's some of the ways that we've got round it. The onus is put back onto the students almost. But mostly what we do get is coming in and saying, can you please add me? Teacher, you haven't added me to the WhatsApp group. Why didn't you add me? So we get quite a lot of that coming back, actually.
Okay. That's obviously something that you can do with the WEA. I think the concern may be for other people where the ruling is that you can't use these social media sites. There's been concern around Zoom. You might be able to say something more about the security level in Zoom, which I know you use a lot. Yeah,
we always make sure we've got the highest security on the Zoom, and it's set up so that it's avoiding any problems. I think there were some issues with Zoom very early on in all this pandemic, and they've been resolved by Zoom by adding in extra security measures. But we have things like enabling a waiting room so that the person teaching the class is allowing other people in, so that you're restricting it to your expected people who've been given the link. It's not just open to anyone. And then there are all the kind of safeguarding things that were covered in another webinar as well. But it's about people being willing to share things. But we're quite confident that Zoom is secure, and as long as all the staff are briefed and follow the rules that we've kind of put in place for using it.
And perhaps our questioner around that could contact you for some reassurance that she could share with her own service as an argument that Zoom can be used safely and securely if you put the right safeguards in place, and that may help others where they're being blocked through their service. It's seen as an unsafe site, because I think that's probably not the only person that's had that particular problem. Yeah.
Sorry, I know there are some restrictions with other social media. I've worked in local authority for a long time as well, but I think just find out what you can use then, and you might have to and keep saying that it's worthwhile educationally. Just in terms of getting equipment to people, there have been some projects, and we've had some funding, and I know some other services have been able to provide tablets and laptops to some groups of people, but it's not universally funded, and I know that is an issue that Sue is picking up at a higher level. But keep looking for things. There are some opportunities. There were things like the Good Things Foundation where there was access for online centres to get extra equipment. So it's just finding out what you can in the meantime until the government decides to fund us more.
Okay, that's good advice. Keep your eyes open for bids you can go for. For example, in London, we've just had the Community Resilience Fund released with up to 30k for community groups. So I'm sure there are opportunities with your partners to look at buying in equipment for student loan. We've got an offer now from Farhad, and he's using a Google form for a digital skills initial and diagnostic assessment, and he'd like to share and discuss it with those who are interested. Farhad, I suggest, I expect Charlie's got an email for you, and maybe that's something we could follow up on outside of this meeting, but that's a good offer for people that are looking for any joint diagnostic assessment using Google Forms. So thank you for that offer. We've got time just to quickly squeeze in maybe 2 quick questions. Could you tell us anything about best practice for teaching the lower level ICT classes? That's coming from Vianne. Lower level ICT, have you got some quick tips there?
We have got some classes, yeah, we have got some classes running. So do they mean Word, Microsoft, Excel, that sort of ICT, or getting onto platforms? Because now we're talking about students trying to access, you know, what's a browser, what's an email address. So a lot of our students have got to have email addresses, and for some students they share email addresses, and that's being a bit problematic for us if you've got a Canvas account set up. So it's 2 things. One is we're upskilling in terms of what is a browser, what is an email address, and trying to get people on with that, and then trying to do things around. So I've got level 1 students who probably I didn't realise until we put things into Canvas that they don't know how to download a document, save it, and then upload it again, which I just, you learn these things as you go along. So I will then put them into a course where they'll be learning that. So we are doing that. What the question was? Good practice.
More about the lower level. I think for IT, level 1 may even be a bit high.
Yeah, the lower.
One quick suggestion you've got there.
I think again it's starting with what people can do. You need IT skills and you need digital learning skills. They're not exactly the same skills, but there are some qualifications. There are courses people have designed. I think design something around exactly what skills people are going to need to be able to use to access their learning, and build that into the course as a starting point. Okay, and even if you start with some Pilates or some fun activities, it's still IT you're learning.
Yeah, I think that was one of the very interesting suggestions you gave, is start with fun. I'm going to finish with one very, very quick question from Mike Ray. I really like this question. What are some of the most successful online classroom tasks that the panel have enjoyed with their learners? Can you give us one really ace enjoyable task? Very quickly now, because Charlie needs to round up and close.
Yes. Yeah, we had where we did a staff one actually, and the tutor had 2 cameras going, which was very impressive. And it was a staff development thing, but it just comes to mind which object will sink or float, and it was just showcasing how you can do practical stuff online. Like, then I was thinking, we could do a cookery thing. We're running Pilates, and I was really surprised at how our Pilates class has gone down. Every single session, really clear instructions. People are coming back, and so those kind of the practical stuff I was really a little bit worried about, and that's gone really well, I think.
Okay, thanks for that. It sounds really fun. A very quick one that's just come in. Is Canvas free?
No.
No, okay, say no more. I'm going to close the questions now. There's still some coming in and some up there, and we'll have to take those after. I hope you've had a really good, enjoyable session. Thank you both so much for your time in doing this webinar. And thank you to all of those people on that working group that have contributed. And we just recommend go and look at those resources, make use of them, and share those good practice examples. I've taken away lots of good ideas myself for my service. So thank you all very much. Charlie, back to you.
Brilliant. We'll round up very quickly. Thanks both Sarah and Yaz, and thanks Johnny for hosting. Main thing is to look at our website, www.holex.org.uk. All the resources from the previous webinars are on there, as are the guidance materials, and we'll upload the ones from this one. We've got one more webinar left, which is Underpinning Technologies on Tuesday, the 3rd of November. So if you're not signed up, please do. And you'll also get more information about some training sessions, which are more detailed 90-minute sessions on some of the very more specific parts of the topics. And some advisory sessions. And I think that's about it really, but yes, keep an eye out. If you look at our website, all the resources will be going on there, and we'll be sending out more information via the e-groups. So thank you for joining us, everybody, and thanks to everyone who got involved.
Thanks.
Thank you, and thanks for everyone who helped.
That wave goodbye, you know, that they do on University Challenge.
Or on Play School.